Listen closely. That is not the sound of a heartbeat. That is the sound of a superpower. Dying. They told you the sanctions were a joke. They told you the West would freeze. They lied. While the Kremlin burns billions on a failed war, the war has finally come for you. Not with missiles, but with hunger. The factories are silent, the shelves are bare, and the empire is bankrupt. Vladimir Putin promised you the Soviet Union back. Congratulations. He delivered the poverty, but forgot the glory. Welcome to the winter of discontent. I know what you're thinking. We've heard this before. Russia is collapsing, blah, blah, blah. I get it. You're skeptical. You've seen the headlines about Russia's resilient economy for years. You probably think Putin has a magic wand made of oil money. But bear with me for a second, because this time, the cracks aren't just in the budget, they are in the foundation of daily life. We are not talking about abstract GDP numbers today. We are talking about why Elena in Moscow can't buy a winter coat, why Ivan in the Urals can't get a mortgage, and why the trains that carry tanks to the front are suddenly stopping on the tracks. This is the story of how a war that was supposed to last 3 days has eaten a country alive from the inside out. Before we dig into the wallet of the average Russian, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button on Mr. Warlog. We don't just read the news, we decode the reality. Let's start with something we all understand, the price of milk. France 24 reports that official inflation spiked to 9% this summer. But let's be honest, when has an official government number ever told the whole story? Ask any Russian mom, and she'll tell you the real inflation feels more like 20%. The Kiev Post dropped a stat that should scare the Kremlin more than any drone. Retail sales of staples like milk, pork, and rice fell by 8 to 10% in September. Think about that. People aren't cutting back on luxury vacations, they are cutting back on rice. When a population stops buying basic food, it's not tightening the belt, it's survival mode. You might say, so what? Prices go up everywhere. True, but in Russia, prices are going up while the future is being canceled. The Moscow Times just published a heartbreaking statistic. Only 8.3% of Russian families can now afford the down payment for an apartment. For the rest, the dream of owning a home is dead. It would take the average worker 6 years just to save for the deposit, assuming they don't eat or pay rent in the meantime. This is the death of the middle class. Putin's social contract was simple. Stay out of politics and you'll live better than your parents. Now, young Russians are realizing they will live worse than their grandparents. But why is everything so expensive? Is it just sanctions? No. It's because Ukraine has decided to burn Putin's wallet. We often talk about the front lines in Donbass, but the real economic war is happening deep inside Russia. The Caspian Policy Center has tracked 61 drone strikes against 24 major refineries. This isn't just about blowing stuff up. It's about systemic paralysis. These refineries make the gasoline that drives the trucks that deliver the food to the supermarket. When Ukraine hits a refinery, the price of diesel goes up. When diesel goes up, the cost of transporting milk goes up. And who pays for it? You guessed it, Elena in Moscow. The Moscow Times reports that the energy minister is blaming panic buying. I mean, come on, do you really believe that? People don't panic buy gas for fun. They panic buy because they know the pumps are running dry. Russia, the energy superpower, is rationing gasoline in Crimea. That's like a baker running out of flour. It's humiliating. Now, here is a detail that most people miss, but it is absolutely critical. I want you to imagine a country as big as Russia without trains. It doesn't work, right? The Insider released a report with a title that says it all. The wheels are coming off. Cargo loading on Russian railways has dropped by 7%. That means 60 million tons of goods, coal, steel, timber, are just sitting there, not moving. 600,000 freight cars are idle. Why? Because the ball bearings that make the wheels turn used to come from Sweden and the USA. Now they come from nowhere. Or they are cheap knockoffs that break. This is the invisible collapse. When the trains stop, the factories stop. And when factories stop, people get fired. But wait, I hear you say. Doesn't the IMF say Russia's GDP is growing? Ah, the magic of GDP. Let me ask you a question. If I pay you $1 million to dig a hole and then fill it back up, does that add value to the economy? Technically, yes. It adds to GDP, but it's useless. That is Russia's economy right now. The Center for Strategic Research admits that growth has collapsed to 0.6% in the third quarter. And that growth is entirely based on building tanks that get blown up in Ukraine. It's zombie growth. The civilian economy, the part that makes clothes, cars, and furniture, is in a coma. The Moscow Times reports that the forestry industry, once a massive exporter, is facing a 20 to 30% slump in 2026. Why? Because they can't sell wood to Europe anymore, and China demands rock-bottom prices. And for those who say sanctions don't work, well, let's look at the bank accounts. Charter 97 confirms that oil and gas revenues, the lifeblood of the Kremlin, crashed by 34%. The US sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil are biting. The shadow fleet is being hunted, as we discussed in our previous video. Putin is burning through his savings. The National Wealth Fund is shrinking. So what does a desperate government do when it runs out of cash? It taxes you. United 24 Media reports that the government is planning a technology levy on electronics and hiking the VAT. So not only can you not afford an iPhone, but the government is going to charge you extra just for looking at one. They are squeezing blood from a stone. But the highest cost isn't in rubles, it's in people. Forbes analyst Ariel Cohen points out a staggering number. Russia is recruiting 29,000 soldiers every month. Think about the economic impact of that. That's 29,000 workers taken out of factories, farms, and offices every single month. That's 350,000 able-bodied men a year removed from the economy and sent to a trench. This creates a labor famine. Factories are raising wages just to find anyone to work, which drives up inflation, which forces the central bank to raise rates, which kills businesses. It's a death spiral. And the cost to the state? The Moscow Times says personnel costs hit a record $25.6 billion in the first half of the year alone. Putin is bankrupting the state to pay for an army that hasn't taken a major city in over a year. So how does the Kremlin respond to this disaster? With denial, of course. Igor Sechin, the oil baron and Putin's close ally, recently said that sanctions will cause an economic crisis in the West. It's almost funny, isn't it? It's like watching a man whose house is on fire, laughing at his neighbor because his lawn is dry. It's pure projection. They are trying to convince the Russian people that we are all in this together, that the West is suffering too. But the average Russian, looking at the price of eggs, knows better. They know that while Sechin sails on his yacht, or what's left of it, they are the ones choosing between heating and eating. And amidst this economic wreckage, there is a whisper of peace. But don't be fooled. Reports from Radio Free Europe suggest that Moscow is signaling a readiness to talk. Why now? Is it a change of heart? No. It's because the bank account is empty. Putin wants a pause. He needs time to fix the trains, rebuild the refineries, and refill the treasury. A ceasefire now would be a lifeline for his drowning economy. It would allow him to declare victory, keep the stolen land, and prepare for the next round. The US 28-point peace plan mentioned in reports is a test. But Kyiv knows the truth. You cannot negotiate with a system that is collapsing. You let it fall. This economic pressure is the second front of the war. And right now, that front is cracking wide open. We've talked about oil and tanks, but there is another victim of this war that is bleeding out in silence. Russia's massive forestry industry. This is a story that almost no one is covering, but it reveals the true depth of Russia's economic isolation. According to the Moscow Times, citing Deputy Industry Minister Mikhail Yurin, Russia's forestry sector is facing a steep production slump of up to 30% in 2026. Why does this matter? Because timber was one of Russia's biggest non-energy exports to Europe. Russian wood built houses in Finland, furniture in Sweden, and paper in Germany. But sanctions have slammed that door shut. Now Russia is trying to sell that wood to China. But here is the trap. China knows Russia is desperate. So, Chinese buyers are demanding prices that barely cover the cost of cutting down the trees. The result? Logging companies in Siberia are going bankrupt. Sawmills in Karelia are closing. The towns that depended on these jobs are turning into ghost towns. Putin has traded a profitable partnership with Europe for a predatory relationship with China, and his own forests are paying the price. If the factories are closing and the wood isn't selling, how is Putin still paying the bills? The answer is terrifying for any economist. He is burning through the family savings. The Kiev Post reports that the Kremlin is frantically selling off the liquid assets in its National Wealth Fund, NWF. This fund was supposed to be the safety net for future generations, for pensions, for infrastructure. Instead, it is being liquidated to buy artillery shells. They are selling gold, they are selling yuan, and because they are selling in a panic, they are getting bad rates. The budget deficit has hit 1.7% of GDP in October alone and is spiraling toward 3% by year-end. To plug this hole, the finance ministry is doing something desperate. They are issuing yuan-denominated bonds. Think about the humiliation of that. Russia, a superpower, is borrowing money in Chinese currency from its own citizens because no one wants its own rubles. It is the financial equivalent of a surrender. But money isn't the only resource running out. The most critical shortage is flesh and blood. We mentioned the 29,000 recruits a month, but where are they coming from? Russia has scraped the bottom of the barrel in its prisons. It has emptied the poor villages of Buryatia. Now it has turned to an international human trafficking scheme. CNN has uncovered a disturbing network. Russia is luring desperate young men from India, Nepal, and Cuba with promises of security jobs or construction work. When they arrive, their passports are seized. They are handed a rifle and sent to the meat grinder in Pokrovsk. This isn't a foreign legion. It is a slave army. The Indian government has formally protested. The families of Nepalese fighters are begging for their return. This exposes a brutal truth. Putin knows that killing 29,000 Russians a month is politically dangerous. So, he is outsourcing death. He is buying foreign lives to save his own regime. But these untrained, unmotivated mercenaries are not effective soldiers. They are dying in droves, often without even understanding the orders given in Russian. It is a cynical, short-term fix for a long-term demographic collapse. So, where does this end? Russia is heading into its fourth winter of war. The reserves are low, the equipment is rusting, the people are tired. Putin is betting everything on one thing, that you, the West, will get tired first. That Ukraine will break before Russia goes broke. But looking at these numbers, the collapsed rail freight, the empty housing market, the burning refineries, it looks like Russia is racing towards a cliff with no brakes. The winter of discontent is here. And for the first time, the cold isn't coming from the weather, it's coming from the economy. What do you think? Can the Russian people endure another year of this economic strangulation? Will the empty shelves finally trigger the protest that the empty promises couldn't? I really want to hear your take on this. Drop a comment below. And if you think this kind of no-nonsense analysis is what the world needs, smash that like button and share this video. It helps us beat the algorithm and spread the truth. I am Charlie from the Mr. Warlog team. Stay sharp, stay informed. Thanks for watching.